Hey everybody, Questwise here, and today I want to talk to you a little bit about a project idea I had, and actually kind of put a sort of call out to you, the viewers, the fans, and see what you thought about this idea, and if it's something that is worth pursuing, or if it's something that you enjoy in your games in particular. And that is sort of the living world concept. What I mean by that is that when you're playing a role playing game, and maybe some of you already do this. I do it to some extent, but it's sometimes it does take a little bit more preparation. I've been trying to think of ways to sort of make this an easier aspect of the game. And what I mean by living world aspect to your campaign world is that even though your characters, the players that are living in this world, are doing things in the world. They're adventuring. They're exploring. They're interacting with different cultures and stuff. Um, the rest of the world sort of still goes on. Things still advance. Things still go forward. And I know that when I was in college, we one of our game masters, Wes, who was a very dear friend of mine, he would run Greyhawk. That was his favorite setting, and we would run through AD&D Second Edition Greyhawk. He loved that setting. And he had such a way as that the world sort of lived outside of just our characters, that things advanced, things happened, things moved forward, so that when we left a particular space and then came back to it, things had changed, things had advanced and had the world sort of lived on outside of our characters. It wasn't just a static thing where every time we'd come back to the city, everybody, oh, the blacksmith's still there. Well, he might not be. Maybe he went under. Maybe the smithy burnt down or some kind of thing. But he had ways of the world sort of changing and living around us, and it's something that is interesting. Has always been interesting to me. The sort of meta world, the living world outside of your player characters that's going on around them. And I've been trying to think of ways to make this rather than a lot of legwork, sitting down in between sessions and being like, okay, so this is a particular time of the year, and this is happening, and this is going on. I wanted to try to find a way a little bit that simplifies that a little bit, that sort of cuts down on the work as a game master of doing those types of things. I really love, and this is probably why my love of OSR and old school games is so strong, is because I love the aspect that the world is dangerous, that the world, there are things going on in the world that even low level characters or even high level characters should sometimes not partake in. So there might be a war going on in a certain realm there, that your characters might want to be part of the political intrigue structure of that, or the actual fighting. There might be a famine going on. There might be all sorts of stuff going on in different parts of the world. There might be a dragon living just north of the city that you're in. And as a first level character, you're probably not going to want to go interact with that unless you have some kind of special mission to go do something there. There's a couple of games I want to talk about today that sort of do that. Excuse me. That sort of do that aspect a little bit, and they give you a small sort of feeling of how to conduct a living world. One of those is the Song of Ice and Fire, the role-playing game. This is the Game of Thrones edition. It's written by Robert Schwab. If that name sounds familiar, he is the brilliant mind behind Shadow of the Demon Lord and some other amazing games. He's worked on D&D and stuff as well too. But this game emulates the books by George R. R. Martin, the Song of Ice and Fire, the same name. The characters are meant to belong to a house, where this gives you rules on how to create your own minor house in the Seven Kingdoms and how to maintain that house, but also things that can happen to that house. Whether there are spies sent, so there's a little bit of metagaming in that aspect as well too. Whether war influences part of your house and stuff as well. If you're aligning with other larger houses like the Lannisters or the Starks, that kind of stuff. So it gives you a little bit of that aspect of things as well too. The other game is Pendragon, or King Arthur Pendragon. This is by Nocturnal Media, I believe. Alan Barr was the one that really pushed me into this, and I really love this game. If you're an Arthurian fan, this is an amazing game to have. This is just a beautiful, beautiful book. gorgeous, gorgeous artwork. But the gameplay itself is very interesting. This is a Greg Stafford game, so if you you know that name sounds familiar to you, he's very influential in some very unique games out there. As well too, but King Arthur Pendragon has this great ability where you are a knight, and you eventually will gain holdings. You will have a manor house, you will have staff, you will have things going on, and it's sort of a little bit more of a meta game. It's called the winter phase in here, when you're not doing anything, you're not out campaigning, you're not questing, you're not doing those kinds of things. You are maintaining your holding. You are dealing with upkeep of your manor and your staff and the things that happen during those times. And I find that really, really interesting. And so one of the ideas I had for this sort of living world idea was to maybe create a set of random charts that you could roll on, so that you could say, you know, your characters. The other thing that's really great about Pendragon, and I should say this before I go any further, is that Pendragon is a saga type game. In that, I mean that you are not going to be playing the same character through the entire campaign. The campaign moves very, very quickly. Every session is considered a year in the life of your character, and eventually your child or your subordinate will take over for you as you retire. Your previous character retires and goes to live out the rest of his life, if he doesn't die, on his estate in his manor with his family. And that your children will sort of carry on the torch, or somebody that you bequeath your title to will continue to carry on. And the game can cover, 50 to 100 years, depending on how long you want to do it. And so with that being said, I want a game in which the characters are off doing something, and I want a way to emulate the rest of the living world around it, alleviating a little bit of work on my behalf as a game master, right? So I'm thinking a series of charts of things that you can roll on. Let's say, in this region there was a massive flood, or there was a raid by a neighboring realm, and this, there's a war that happened, and this is what happens. This is the outcome. Or when your characters return, that the war is now ongoing. That sort of emulates the politics and the world and the environment around the area, around the world, specifically the sort of areas that that are important to the player characters and stuff as well too. But either a series of charts or a deck of cards, I think, would work really, really well as well too. You could shuffle up the cards, randomly draw some for each holding or each realm that you're interested in. Now that does create a little bit more work again for the game master, in that they have to sort of create a map. Unless you're playing in an established world setting where you already have a map, you can break the map down into different regions and have these effects happening. I think, a deck of cards would be a great idea. I think that would be a really interesting way to do it. But I think the charts would be maybe a little better if you wanted some more depth, because there are certain mitigating circumstances that can happen, right? So you could say that these two realms are, there's a high tension between them. Thus, it might push your roll on the chart a little higher, maybe a +2 towards, the fact that there might be a war between them about to spark up. And so it would be a random roll to see how this kind of thing. It's almost like an oracle, like a GM emulator kind of idea, in that it would sort of further the sort of randomize how things happened. The tensions between these two regions might be high, but depending on your die roll, it could break out into all-out war, or it could be a peace treaty that's signed, right? So I like the idea of a sort of meta gaming world. There's sort of a bigger structure of things going on around. And to me, that makes a more interesting story. I like to run my campaigns in that it's not just a series of adventures one after another, that there's a larger thing going on in the world. And whether your characters are involved in that or not, they're doing their own thing. I like the characters to feel like they're living in a world that is actually growing and expanding around them. And that, to me, is a fun way to play a game. I like characters to feel like they're invested in the world. I like the players to think that there are bigger things out there, that they could go and do things like establish maybe a keep and start their own small kingdom, or create a business in a town, a city. and profit from those kinds of things as well too. And on the outside of that, them leaving and going in and adventuring and doing all these things, being sent on missions and quests and all this kind of stuff as well too. So kind of an open question to the community out there is, what do you think? And I'm slowly working on putting some of this stuff together. Once I do, I'll probably make it available over on DriveThruRPG. I want to try to make it as system neutral as possible so that it can be used. It would probably be more fantasy based because, I mean, that's my jam. That's my wheelhouse. I love fantasy. And that's always the kind of games that I gravitate towards. But let me know what you think in the comments down below, and I'd love to have an open discussion about this and talk to you about my process of building that along the way as well too. So until next time, I'm Questwise, and I am out.